Hello, everyone, from this absolutely insane setting of mine. Alessandria is not quite that flash. Hi.
Hi, and welcome from Boston. I've gone from California all the way to the other side of the US. So I'm now home and
So,
fully accompanied by my pug on my lap. So if you hear snoring, that's what that is. Go back to sleep.
so if you hear any snoring, that's the pug. If you hear
That's the pug.
any breeze and any palm trees, that's the Lanzarote backdrop.
But this is a perfect way for us to talk about some of the things that we were chatting about before we recorded, which is, balancing who you are with being professional, which we talked about a little bit last time. And then also, how do we re engage when we take time away for ourselves um, and come back to being kind of that transitioning back into our work self?
Right. And we know, right, that different people need different things. And I do believe that leaders, as they went through their professional lives, they have spent the time to figure out what works for them, right? That even if they don't want to, even if they haven't sat down organizedly, they would have done. And it kind of, we all know whether, the, almost like choice number one is, do we separate life and work? That's one of the kind of almost the big things we need to decide for ourselves. And we all would like to, right? Because we have this presumption that it cannot have life. You shouldn't, what is it, live to work, but you should work to live. Okay?
Right.
And so we all would like that. The time off, ideally, we work a little bit and we party a lot. That's everyone's ideal in life, right? Unfortunately, that doesn't work at all. And also, more unfortunately, in a sense, and I think relevant for all of us leaders, is if we are asked to now be visible and be on social media and be very present with our people and be very human and be very normal and alive, then unfortunately that separation is going to, I think, be even more gone, because
Yeah.
realistically you can't do it. I can't do it. Maybe other people can do it, but I can't really do it where I make the separation that clear. So I've
No,
accepted combination instead.
yeah, right. The combination, right? How do you balance that? But I think we talked last time too about, and then having the impression management, but that aligns with who you want to be as a leader. Like, what do I stand for? I saw a TikTok this morning that was a guy talking about, well, when you're a leader, you no longer have the right to emotions or feelings or any of, you can't think about yourself anymore. Being a servant leader means you no longer matter. Uh,
There's so much bad advice out there. It's insane. I mean, if you
yeah,
don't matter, how are you going to ever show anyone how to be human and how to be worthwhile?
exactly. Exactly. So, and I just posted on LinkedIn this study that came out where they did brain scans as people watched coaching, different types of coaching. And they saw that tell coaching, should language, you should be this way, you should do this, telling people just absolutely does not activate the part of our brain that helps us learn. It puts us on the defense, just organically, biologically. We're trying to do something that we are not wired to do. So when we say things like, better understand yourself, use your values to help guide your decisions, that's when it showed that it activated the learning part of our brain. So we just know physically this way that we've been working just doesn't work.
I think that when you say stuff like that, people are like, right, but so what? What should I be doing? And why does this matter to me? And I think maybe this is kind of the dissonance we fight against all the time, my Sandra, is the fact that people get it in theory. And as soon as they have to apply that lens to themselves or the environment they're in, that clarity disappears, right? It's this dissonance we've been talking about. And I think you're perfectly right. Being the thing is, we're asking for people to change how they've done things all along, right? This leadership style that they've learned from school, they've come style leadership all in only in quotation marks, because obviously neither is it leadership nor style when you are simply commanding, controlling, and barking orders. But that is what they know, and when you come from a place of fear, you then have to kind of carry on with that. If you're not going to carry on with that, you're going to change your tune towards servant leadership. I think you should consider what it means. I think if you're ever a manager that says, I want to be a different type of person or a different type of leader with my people, wonder what kind. Because do you know what? There are many kinds out there of terminologies, and people bandy all these terms around, whether it's servant, whether it's empathic, whether it's 2.0, whether it's adaptive. Forget what it's called. Just be, what kind of human do I want to be? Because I'd rather we walked away from the topics. I want to be for real. I want to be me, and I want to be kind, and I want to be with you. That was you. I don't know what that was. I don't know if that was a shooting. I heard that noise on your side. Have you heard it?
You heard that noise on my side? I
Yeah.
apologize.
No, what is? I just had it.
It was my parrot.
Oh God, that's. Am I
It was my
annoying the
parrot.
parrot? Is it parroting me?
The parrot just decided to fly in here and announce and make sure that we all knew he was here. So now
Oh,
we
I
all
think
know he's here.
it is how little I see of the screen.
He's behind the screen. He's over there now. Anyway, I thought he was caged. He is not. This is what happens when you don't clip their wings. Anyway, but so that's why it's so important to be grounded in what do you want to stand for as a leader.
Right.
It's, you know, it's funny. I presented this topic to a group of nutrition and food and nutrition. Hold on, sorry.
No, what is? While you do that, let me say something else that is interesting, and we'll come back to it maybe. Hopefully, hopefully interesting, not hopefully come back. Which is the other day I was reading a study and hearing a talk that had to do with what is the one success factor for in general in life. You know, leadership, kids, whoever wants to make it. What's the success factor? And it's a famous TED talk actually, and I think it's worth looking at. It's from a really interesting. Set of researchers that I've worked with the science of neurobehavioral adaptation, if you wish, and what they came up with in really relative terms. Please go look it up properly. I don't remember details. Is that the quality they could see in common between a predictor of success was beyond and above up. No, what is it called? Up and above or over the value of IQ or EQ or any other kinds of values was the value of grit. And after they've explained this, they've tried to bring it back to basics. What does grit mean? Is it just resilience? Is it a willingness to do a lot? Is it kind of, and I think what they're proposing is they also linked it to the study where children, very young children, were given visuals and supportive information that the brain is capable to change. That was literally the one difference they could find between people with grit and not grit, were people who had what they call a growth mindset. So people who knew that there is no limit, there is no, that failure is not permanent, that when you did something wrong, it's not staying in that state, but you have to continuously grow, that we are continuously evolving. So in other words, the only people who eventually ended up doing anything were the ones who had the perseverance because they knew that is a possibility. So if we don't tell our kids, our leaders, our new workers that the growth mindset and the continuous improvement thing is a thing they need for themselves, for life, we can't help them.
Right. But here's the thing. Let's just talk about how that, what that means in real life, right? So we grow up, at least in the US, through an educational system for 12 years that is pretty darn binary. It's pretty much, pass, fail, mistakes will be graded, and you will be measured accordingly. And so we've reinforced this binary mindset of win lose, and especially when it comes to things like standardized testing, where we then teach to the test. I mean, there's all these things we put in place that do not teach or reinforce a growth mindset.
Right.
And so we talk to kids about it. Like I've had my kids get taught what a growth mindset is, but we don't put in the behavior and the structure that reinforces it. right?
That's exactly the problem, both in business and in life, right? We know this stuff. This is what we were saying earlier. The dissonance is between knowing it and putting it in practice. It's kind of
So
what breaks.
yeah, exactly. So back to the leader part, right? So one of the things I think people operate from a place of fear is I don't want to stand out or be different in a pejorative, negative way from my peers, or I want to be able to fit, culture fit. We talked about that last time. However, so that takes bravery, that takes courage. And that also in some ways takes privilege. If I can afford the risk of taking of losing my job,
Undoubtedly,
that
yes.
enables me to do more and be more brave.
And we acknowledge
So
that privilege for our part every time. I hope that everyone knows we're not claiming everyone else should be as cray-cray and as honest as we are. We get it.
yes, but let's just put that. Let's acknowledge that and kind of think about that as in context. Taking care of yourself is an internal action. Self-reflection, self-compassion, acceptance. That's internal. That does not need to be externalized.
Right.
If you do not feel safe. And that is hugely impactful in how you show up as a leader, right?
And that even goes for branding, right? Once you start working on that and on your continuous improvement, it doesn't need to be external. You don't need to immediately get fired because you're out there, but you need to start working on this yourself, right? Like you say, it can be still internal and not putting you in any kind of danger for a while.
But I think we have these mental models of what it means to be a leader. And that sense of I absolve myself of having emotions. I am no longer allowed to have feelings. I'm no longer allowed to have needs because now I am a leader. And that's just not real. That is not, there's no switch that we just go click and we turn to, I'm going to be real nerdy, the Vulcan with no emotions. Right. That's just not real. And so, so I think one, we have to raise awareness, which is what people in our secret society are doing. Raise awareness that you are human, not a machine, and you will have feelings.
And that
period.
will be okay. To make
right, if we just say that, imagine how much different work would be.
Yeah.
If we just change the mindset of, oh, it's not personal, it's business.
Yes, all of it.
Yes.
It's not personal, it's business. This is how we behave around here. I completely agree. I know that people are in, like I said, in very different personal situations. They're not in a place where we could do it. But if we could do it, if it were okay, if there was a switch tomorrow, if we could have, imagine we could have everyone would be equipped with a lie detector in a meeting. Yeah. And we would then, at the end of it, look to see how many times we've either refrained or blatantly lied. I think we would be surprised. The mass psychosis that often happens in some of these organizations that have more human debt than others, this allows us to kind of get out of it at all. A moment clicks in that leadership team where no one is willing to speak up and point, right, at naked emperors, like I say, because now the norm in this particular group is of no psychological safety, is of no courage, right? So if you start having that norm and you don't attack it at every corner and you don't every time come up with it, and look, this is not even just leadership. I think starting to live this kind of super authentic, super courageous, this is what I genuinely believe in, I will tell you all the time sort of thing, is one, empowering and feels good, really. And secondly, just useful because you can go on in your professional life and even in your personal life knowing you're delivering on the same vision and purpose that you've agreed with people on, and you can keep for them. So I know
you have to get comfortable with rejection. Right.
And
you have to get comfortable with, right, exactly, no longer being a people pleaser, but more being thoughtful and humane and kind, right? Still live your values. Don't be a fill in the blank.
I like that. I don't know if our listeners are familiar with it, but you must know about the pack model, where these this incredible psychologist has come up with an explanation as to, if you wish, what are the roles in communication. And in very simplistic terms, we can be either a child, a parent, or an adult. And I think at work, we often want to pretend we're adults, but what's happening is everyone lives in this adaptive child phase where they glare at the enterprise and they're disconnected. And there's no one around to be nurturing parent. There's only like this enterprise thing that's going to sanction them, punish them, kick them out, cut something, make them suffer somehow. And there's no one to that they can show off for. It's a very unpleasant state of communication that we have created in most of our organizations. So I encourage everyone to look a little bit at the pack model and presume, where am I in this conversation? Am I a child? Am I a parent? Am I an adult? And as a leader, I think you always need to show up as a nurturing parent, even if you want to show up as an adult and say, what the hell is wrong with you? Let's all be grown up. Or even if you want to show up as an adaptive child, I don't want to do the thing either. You can't do any of those things. You do need to show up as a nurturing parent. I think maybe that's what that guy was trying to say, but didn't know how to put it. It isn't you can't be human. It isn't you can't feel. It is taking the cue that once you are a nurturing parent, whatever new type of leader that cares about the humans, you're going to get it in the neck sometimes. They're not going to like it all the time. It's not going to be easy. But you'll always be honest, you'll always be true, you'll always care about their butts, and you'll always talk to them from the heart. That's all you need to do, I think.
Well, I'm going to add one more thing. And you're always curious.
Yes.
You know, when people ask me, where do I start? I always say, start with a question. And don't ask one question, always ask two. Because if I know I have to ask a second question, that means I have to actually listen to the answer for the first one. So often it's like, how are you? It's interesting how often people ask that in ways that are actually kind of not really appropriate. I can't. So as we talked about last time, I'm going through the process of end of life care for my grandmother, and she's passed. And so, you know, I have funeral people. How are you? And I'm like, why are you asking me this question? There's no decent. Yeah, like it's just so automatic because it's almost like hello.
Yeah.
But I want to talk about something actually that you touched on about this parent, child, adult model. So I work with a couple of companies right now who have either had a restructure or are going through a merger. And they've hired us to help the team build skills and capabilities to navigate that difficult challenge, right? So we focus on helping people build these skills based on the research in neuroscience about what helps us navigate challenges more effectively, right? So building resiliency, if you want to call it that. And it's just interesting because you can look at that two ways. You could say that's the company saying, suck it up. And here's why if you feel bad, that there's a gap for you and like, let's fill that gap. Or which is not how I see it, obviously, because I don't want to be in that space, is, hey, we understand this is difficult. Sometimes difficult decisions have to be made, and we want to give you skills and capabilities to navigate those more effectively. That's what the World Health Organization says we should do. Right. But often we find the mindset of employees is that I have to find someone to blame, and it's going to be this generic leadership or, you know, this kind of parent model. So we have to try to holistically, not just from a leader perspective, but from an employee perspective, start to see the human in everyone, including the people we work with and the people we work for.
True. I don't want to, offer advice that's unsolicited. I lie, I do. But what I do usually, or what we do at People Not Tech when we go into teams that are new and teams that, because they've been bought or restructured, is I always start with a bitch fest, because you can be sure they have a lot on their shoulder. And I feel like until all those chips are on the table, and the bitch fest is a play we do with teams where in a very structured fashion we ask them what's on their mind, right? If I were CEO, would I do? If in the last 5 years, the best thing would have been to X. All of the things that no one has ever asked you as an employee, in particular in the light of a big change. And what we found is that it just pushes that team through the roof immediately as soon as they've opened up to each other about how they feel about the topic. And they just all of a sudden, then you can have a different, right, how all do we, do it? But the fact that it's so rare, if you wish, that any of these big cultural moves and actions exist anywhere does my head in. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. I mean, companies are purchasing other companies every day, every minute, without having checked for 1 second what kind of people they have in it and what kind of culture they have in it. None. Ask investors the truth about the culture due diligence they do, and they'll tell you it doesn't exist. They do none. They get a feeling. They talk to the founders for a lunch or two. That's it. Everyone else maybe will deal with it. But they don't. You can't just deal with everyone else. They go in, they function with these people, whatever those people are. In particular, when you're talking about, that gap between a startup and the scale up, right? Anywhere from 50 to 2,000 people, 1,000 people, which is where our economies really move, which is where we make all of these things, which is where all the innovation happens. Those are places where you can't recycle the entire everyone, right? You can't, and plus you wouldn't do it even if you want to. No one just comes in and sends everyone away and gets new people in. That doesn't exist. It's only in the movies. So what ends up happening is you do a lot of due diligence financially, you do some due diligence technology-wise, not enough, and you do no due diligence on people. You get in, and then those companies, no matter how much pressure you put on transformation, don't end up making it. But what happens to these people then and those companies, right? These are startup guys that have worked their asses off, and now they've been like bought by some unknown entity that kind of it's hard, right? It's a hard time in everyone's life. But those should have been the moments when by default you'd have an audit of where you are on your human debt, a clear team. Do we all agree on these bloody principles? Do we all know why? And this is how we're working. How can it be that never happens? Why don't we have a team relaunch in every goddamn team everywhere once every 3 months? It boggles my mind that these big things, the due diligences, the checks, the every time you have big change, this should happen, that they are not in the vocabulary of business. What does that say about people?
Yeah. Well, actually, in 2022, I saw a couple articles that banks like Prudential, Aon, Bank of America were working on a mental health index as part of their due diligence.
Very
so
good.
In other words, how healthy are the employees, right? So we look at I was talking to a health and safety person yesterday, and he said, we look at the physical hazards. We're required to have safe workplaces, but we only look at the physical hazards. We don't look at the psychological hazards. And we have this well documented. We know what those are, just like we know. I mean, we have fire drills, right? How many people have actually been in a fire at work? Not many. But we don't look at the, right? No problem. No problem with that.
Drills. What happens when we get restructured? What happens if we get bought over? Let's have a drill. How will you feel if your team changes? What if you start working from the office? All of those things.
Yeah, we do crisis aversion, risk assessments, all these things. But one of the things that came out last year as well, looking at people risk, the number one risk at the same level as cyber attacks is mental health. And it was the lowest rated by companies. So highest risk by outside auditors looking at risk, lowest rated, lowest area of focus for companies.
Because
that's a huge gap.
It's a personal topic that we shouldn't touch because we are professional.
Which means what?
You don't understand. You shouldn't be talking about these personal things at work, and you've lost it. That's why you're talking about it, because you have this colorful hair, and you don't understand that serious people in business don't talk about these things.
But even if I don't want to talk about my personal life, right? I still have feelings. I still react.
No, if you are a real consummate professional and a good leader, you wouldn't.
Yes. And the other thing is, so when I started researching about restructures and big organizational changes, there's been all these psychological studies about the emotions that humans go through naturally. that we never address in our change management plan. We've never addressed how do we handle the guilt and imposter syndrome and post-traumatic stress disorder of the survivors of a layoff. Never seen that on a change plan.
Never seen it addressed with words. No one has said, how are you feeling that we left all of your friends die?
Yes.
A
Yes.
Rocket in Guardians of the Galaxy moment, and no one asked Rocket if he's okay. But the first time I saw Guardians, and I have to use it before I forget it. But I don't know if we've landed at all on this mental health thing. I feel like we are at the cusp of doing some wrong moves, if you wish, in the workplace on this topic. Possibly, who knows? But the more I look into this, and my new hyperfixation is this like neurodivergence at work and what has it done for us. And I'm really up in arms about people that call it a disability, and the fact that we don't yet, really utilize what we learn from people that are already non-linear in their thinking. It does my head in. But while researching this, I found a ridiculous amount of corporate integration of neurodivergence whitewashing, if you wish, with things like don't give oral instructions to people. Look, I don't want to give an example because some of these things could have been useful for some of these people. So essentially, a bevy of workplace adaptation for these people with an inability, right, with a disability. I have a problem with how we put that. I don't want to think that I am someone with a disability who needs to be kind of worked with in a certain fashion, but maybe I am. But shouldn't we all know how we should be worked with? I saw a TikTok the other day. We can link it here. A genius one where a guy was saying it was him in two different instances, obviously talking to himself as the employer. So in one instance, he's the new employer, and the new employee is autistic, and the new autistic employee comes in and says, "Oh, hi, here is a README about me," and the guy goes like, "Well, what the hell is this? Well, don't you have one?" No. Well, this just says I would like clear communication. I don't like any changes of plans, if at all possible. So can you warn me a lot? And these are just the ways that I feel better as a human being. If at all you could keep an eye on them. And the person says, "Oh, these are all your preferences. So are you handicapped or something?" No, it's just that this is what I need. Okay, fine. I heard you. And then puts the paper down and says, "We're not going to do any of this. We're going to do my preferences." And the person that's autistic goes, "Okay, what are those?" And the employer just stops responding. And that is exactly the point. No one tells you what their bloody preferences are. No one tells you as a neurodivergent person, what is the world expecting out of us? Whereas we are very clear what to expect out of the world. And I think this is something that needs to be taken in by work. But one quick other point before I forget, because I will, is I am not surprised we're so behind on these things, because we are much more behind on bigger things. I'll give you a big example. Everyone that listens to this should be familiar with the name of Ron Westrum, who is probably the biggest mind behind any type of theory of organizational development ever. And if you strip away all of the hundreds of years of research and speak and talks and work he's done, you are left with the three buckets of three types of organization. And they are so true and so intrinsically clear that you have to wonder what the hell is the holdup that not every organization in the world sees this, uses this, and acts on this, because they are either toxic or bureaucratic or generative. There are no other kinds. And if you are toxic and you are bureaucratic, bloody get to generative. It's not that hard. But if this incredible man has said this incredible thing 30, 40 years ago, just like that amazing woman we have in psychological safety, Amy Edmondson, has been talking about this for 20 years and we don't do anything. What is the bloody holdup? Why do we know all these things and do not translate them to the business world? And how much runway do we think we have to keep ignoring them?
I have a question. So what do people lose, especially those in power, when they move to a generative workplace or when they create a psychologically safe workplace? What do they lose?
Their perception.
In your mind. The perception of power and control. And control. So if I have a psychologically safe workplace, that means people can question my decisions. That means that people will undermine my power, undermine, and we have such insecurity and imposter syndrome that just winds its way up and the higher we go, as we know, the more the propensity for those things to become problematic, right? And so it's all about this. It's all, I say it every time, it's all fear. It's all fear.
But here's another big one for you, and I will discuss this on our other podcast as well, because we've talked about it all night last night with Dave on the porch, which is, if we want to remove all fear, from the enterprise, and we absolutely do, we all agree, right? We shouldn't but why should you have any fear at work? It's an insane theoretical concept. Like, you go there to give something of yourself that's a skill, they take it, they use it, goodbye. Like, that transaction should not imply any fear. It's insane.
Hold on, before you move off of that, here are the things I hear. I hear, one, people will take advantage. Two, people don't like to work. This belief that people don't like to work, which is kind of BS, because bore out is actually more detrimental to us than burnout. So people aren't actually innately lazy. They actually like to work. It's helpful to our mental health. And that you'll get taken advantage of, that it's a waste of money. I mean, there's this kind of negative bias towards other humans.
But we know that.
We think we can keep that back, right? Sorry.
I don't know if we can or we can't, but I think we can. We have to arrive to where we get more honest about this, because if we are going to take fear out of the enterprise, which we said we absolutely do. We want no one to be fearful. But we also agree that fundamentally people do get motivated by either the threat of something or the promise of something. That isn't something, corporate America has come up with. Motivation wise, carrot and sticks do exist. It's the way psychology works. It's not being unpleasant. But if we say, so stick shouldn't be a work instrument, right? We shouldn't be telling people off, punishing them. That shouldn't be a fear instrument. But how much carrot are we leaving people with then? If we only have to power them with pleasure and enjoyment of work, when are we doing that then? Because I think in the same breath in which we say we're removing fear, we have to say, and we're replacing it with people enjoying their work, and then being participatory, and then being invested, and then being so engaged that they will fucking wake up earlier to do it. Then it lost me.
Well, we got most of you, but they're talking about the carrot. Yeah. So I think that people, again, the fear is hiding behind the stick, right? And that's a feeling of power and control. Right.
And the question is, I don't know if you heard that part. Have we replaced it with the carrot?
Right. What is the carrot?
Where's the carrot for people? Give people enough carrot and they'll work for you overnight when you don't want them to.
And the carrot doesn't have to be money. We always think the carrot is money. The carrot is not money.
It's not. And I be very honest, and I don't know if I should say this because my team is going to be a bit taken aback, but they know this from me as well. When I do my job as a leader enough and they are motivated enough, I have to keep them from working that hard. Like literally, I have to tell them to lay off, not do it now. Tell them priorities are not that high because I can see them really going too hard. So people can get the meaning of going behind the purpose that you believe in is so heavy that you don't need anything else. So your only job as a leader is to remember what the bloody purpose is. Keep getting it out of your humans in a way that means something for them. Easier said than done.
So we've covered a lot of ground.
I don't know what time it is because I can't see my screen, so I have no idea how long it is.
I have no idea how long we've been talking either. That's okay. 33 minutes. But I just want to kind of recap for the secret society folks, right? If you were going to say, what are 3 things that you can get started on today to start this work in the ways we've been talking about? What would those 3 things be in your mind?
I would first and foremost sit down with myself with a cup of whatever is your favorite drink and go, what do I genuinely 100% believe in and can put my weight behind when it comes to my work, right? What makes me happy? What can I tell other people? When I am clear on that purpose, I don't need to have sticks as a leader and I can then go harder. So one, crystal clarify your purpose. And if you have none and you just want to die and you don't want to be in that company, none of this conversation is useful for you, because we're not going to be able to make people into human work advocates or human death fighters who just want to die. Yeah, let's be clear. If you're one of those super motivated leaders, this is not a conversation for you. I urge you to get out. But if you're in one, figure out what you're left with purpose-wise, passion-wise. Try and get your people to hear it from you. At least tell them, you know what? I spent the afternoon thinking about this, and I still believe we can change the world in XY fashion. Go talk to them. That's the number one thing I would say do. And then just strengthen your own brand. As we say this over and over again, the stronger you feel that you have landed on the idea of why you have to be kind and empathic and get these people along, the further you'll go. Surround yourself with other people. That's what the secret society is for. So you know that others are doing the same things. You're not alone. You're not the only crazy idiot screaming in the woods. Those are the three.
So I love that. So I would have said many of the same things, of course, because this is why you and I talk to each other. But the first thing is be really clear about your why. And it can't be because I got paid more. If that's your why, which I've heard, yeah, that's going to be a struggle. Find your why then. And then two, I think this is kind of like your second, but maybe slightly different, which is be kind to yourself. Forgive yourself for anything you've done in the past that doesn't align with that why. Recognize this is difficult. It's not easy. And that 70% of leaders are terrible. So your goal is to not be in that group and to just take care of yourself. You're going to mess up. You're going to do some things wrong. But be patient and kind to yourself. Practice that self-compassion. Because if you aren't well, you can't take care of your team. And then I agree with you totally, Duena. One of the ways of being self-compassionate is to connect with other humans and to find your group, find your tribe, find your community, however you want to think about it. Be that, a best friend at work, be it, people through this secret society, just whatever it is. Humans do better when we connect to other humans and we see that we aren't alone. I've been through this before and I can do it again, or I've seen other people who've been through this and they've been okay. Like that connection is a way of creating that self-compassion. So those would be my three places to start.
I think there are no other places at all than those three. Those are amazing. And honestly, one thing I always remind people about, which is it's tried and you've heard it 100 times, but whenever leaders ask me for what would you use as a motto or as a mantra, I always say start every conversation with a deep breath when you say to yourself, I'm human, they're human. And after you say that, everything will be different.
Love that. All right. Well, I'm human. You're human. Our listeners are human. The dog is snoring.
It's not human.
The parrot was squawking.
It's not secret.
We're good.
But we'll see you guys online, and you can hear us next week. We'll also start chatting we have a couple of things we're announcing that will be interesting, I think, to everyone. So we're going to hear a lot more voices soon. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
We'll
Bye.
see you soon. Bye.